Momentum today for a bill that would allow Kentucky farmers to grow industrial hemp.
WDRB's Bill Francis explains what happens next.
The Senate Agriculture Committee voting to approve legislation that would eventually allow farmers in Kentucky to grow industrial hemp.
Motion carries.
The unanimous vote came after the committee heard from both sides on this controversial issue. The bill, sponsored by Committee Chairman Paul Hornback, a Shelby County farmer, would regulate industrial hemp production in the state if the federal government lifts its ban on the crop.
I'm here in my hemp shirt today, and that's why I've taken my jacket off.
An unusual sight. Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky and Democrat Congressman John Yarmouth of Louisville, political opposites, but side by side on this issue, both working on the federal level to lift the ban on hemp production.
It's a crop that's legal everywhere else in the world except for the United States. Everywhere else. Everybody else has figured out how to do this.
I'm convinced that industrialized hemp represents an enormous economic future for whoever is willing to take advantage of it.
But the head of the Kentucky State Police told the committee that it's difficult to distinguish hemp from marijuana, so that would place an additional burden on officers in the field.
You'll hear folks that say they have the expertise, that they can identify those by readily looking at them, by the way they grow, by their characteristics. That is not the case.
But Ag Commissioner James Comer, who has led the charge to try to get hemp legalized, disagreed.
And the country closest to us that is most often mentioned in discussion, Canada, reports no increase in marijuana whatsoever in the production of industrial hemp. None.
And Commissioner Brewer, I take all your concerns to heart, and I fully understand what you're talking about, and I think we can work through this.
The bill now has to be approved by the full Senate, where Hornback believes it has a good chance of passage. Its future in the House is still uncertain. At the state capitol, Bill Francis, WDRB News.
More than $29 million.
It is a controversial proposal, but now it is one step closer to becoming law. This afternoon, a Senate committee passed a bill allowing hemp in Kentucky.
The passage came after a number of high-profile supporters testified in front of the committee. WKYT's Brittany Paulette has more from Frankfort in our top story at 5.
Some strong opinions from those in support of industrialized hemp coming here to Kentucky, and some big concerns from those who are against it. But when it came down to a vote, the decision was unanimous.
The Senate Committee on Agriculture approved Senate Bill 50 after hearing testimony from both sides.
We've also heard that you cannot get high off of hemp. You can get high off of hemp.
And Kentucky State Police Commissioner Rodney Brewer fears that would likely lead to more crime.
In Kentucky last year, we eradicated 441,000 illegal marijuana plants and arrested 524 people for cultivating marijuana.
But those in support of industrialized hemp believe the crops would be closely regulated and that the opportunity for job growth would be huge.
I don't think it's going to replace corn, and I'm not up here saying this is the panacea that next year everybody's going to work for a hemp farmer. But why not legalize something that could produce jobs and probably will?
Wearing a shirt made of hemp, U.S. Senator Rand Paul acknowledged the opportunity that he sees for Kentucky to be a leader.
It's not very often you get a brand new agricultural product, so we're going to work hard. We're not done yet, but I'm going to ask the president if we can pass this for a waiver so Kentucky could be a leader in growing hemp.
Now, no matter what the state decides, it'll still be up to those in Washington to make a final decision. In Frankfort, Brittany Paulette, WKYT.
Now on Wednesday, WKYT is tracking down more answers in this growing debate for you. I'll talk with a Kentucky business owner ready to get in the hemp industry, and I'll also show you how the state plans to monitor the crop if industrial hemp were to get the green light here in the state.
Hemp was a hit today in Frankfort. The Senate Agriculture Committee had the first hearing for Senate Bill 50, which would give Kentucky farmers the opportunity to grow industrial hemp.
But this issue has overwhelming support of the people.
State Ag Commissioner James Comer says industrial hemp would be a cash cow for someone. State Police Commissioner Rodney Brewer says the problem is that someone is marijuana growers.
Because of the similarities between hemp and marijuana. They are identical in appearance when it comes to the naked eye.
State police and the Commonwealth's attorneys were the lone voices against industrial hemp because of fears it would make fighting marijuana growing more difficult. Otherwise, it was an all-star cast testifying in favor of a bill that would set up a way for Kentucky to grow it.
The marijuana growers are about the last people
who want industrial hemp.
From former CIA director and member of the North American Industrial Hemp Council, James Woolsey, to longtime hemp proponent Senator Rand Paul.
It's a crop that's legal everywhere else in the world except for the United States.
And Representatives Thomas Massey and John Yarmouth arguing it would bring jobs to Kentucky, helping farmers who once grew tobacco.
I am loath to give up on any potential economic opportunities that this Commonwealth possesses.
You've all heard of eBay. Nobody's heard of the second online bidding site. You've all heard of Facebook. You've all heard of Google. What if somebody sat back and said, well, let's see how the search engine business goes for Google before we get into this business.
It's testimony that convinced 10 members of the Ag Committee to give it unanimous support.
Senate Bill 50 still has to pass the full Senate and then head over to the House before it would become law. And even if all of that happens, federal law still has hemp on its list of controlled substances. Some Kentucky lawmakers are pushing a bill in Washington that would change that. They also plan on asking the DEA for an exemption if those bills fail to pass.
The push to license hemp production here in Kentucky moves forward in Frankfort. This afternoon, the Senate's Ag Committee gave the bill the green light. The movement is bringing together Kentucky lawmakers who normally aren't on the same side. WHAS 11's political editor Joe Arnold reports from Frankfort.
Pro-hemp Kentuckians rallied under the statue of Henry Clay, the 19th century's biggest hemp supporter when Kentucky led the world. It's an idea, they say, whose time has come again.
Farmers up in Woodford County is hurting for a crop to grow, you know. And my dad growed hemp on the farm that I'm living on now back in '40 during the war.
That's when the government asked farmers to grow hemp. Now, 35 Western industrialized nations grow it for food, fiber, and fuel. But because the plant is a cousin of marijuana, state police warn hemp farming would complicate drug eradication.
An illegitimate farmer, but probably more than likely someone else without his or her knowledge could easily insert marijuana into a legitimate hemp crop without their knowledge.
Hemp supporters say a marijuana grower would stay far away from industrial hemp because cross-pollination weakens marijuana.
Would he do that? Only really if he knows nothing about botany or he's high on marijuana.
Former CIA Director James Woolsey topped the high-powered and bipartisan hemp lobby, which also includes Tea Party Republicans Thomas Massey and Rand Paul, wearing a Canadian-bought hemp shirt.
So basically, we're exporting our profit to Canada.
And Liberal Democrat John Yarmouth says hemp is coming regardless if Kentucky leads the way.
All of us here are strongly committed to making sure that Kentucky is not left behind.
Motion carries.
After unanimous approval by the Senate Ag Committee, the hemp bill's biggest political hurdle remains state police opposition.
I'll extend an invitation to Commissioner Brewer, an open invitation to come back to the Department of Agriculture, and we'll talk in detail.
Even if the hemp bill should pass the Senate, House Speaker Greg Stumbo says there should be no rush to judgment, and he is calling for a study of this issue, often code language for very little chance for this bill passing on the House side. In Frankfort, Joe Arnold, WHAS 11 News.
Kentucky's members of Congress in Frankfort today are backing federal legislation that would legalize hemp cultivation or at least grant Kentucky a waiver from the federal ban.